Far-right US politician claims that global warming and carbon is good.
Who's the politician?
So this is for the US,
Okay.
not Australia. And maybe we can insert the YouTube clip. It's actually,
Okay.
I think it was, she did it on TikTok, I think. No, yeah, I think
Fantastic.
it might have been on TikTok, but she was on like a TV host, a show host.
This earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us. We've already warmed 1 degree Celsius, and do you know what's happened since then? Here, let me tell you. We have had more food grown since then, which feeds people. We are able to, producing fossil fuels keeps people's houses warm in the winter. That saves people's lives. People die in the cold.
Right.
This earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us. It helps us to feed people. It helps keep people alive. It helps. The earth is more green than it was years and years ago, and that's because of the earth warming. That's because of carbon.
Her name's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She claims that the earth has already increased by 1 degree and that helps grow more crops to feed more people, and that fossil fuels are good to keep people warm, which keeps them alive.
Fascinating.
And I
train of
quote,
thought.
yes, I quote, "Plants need carbon. It's a life cycle, but climate activists want to kill carbon."
Fascinating. Well, I'm going to let you continue with this thought in a moment.
thank you.
But the first thing out of the bat, I'm like, it's so strange how we can't deny, besides that very last point, they want to remove carbon, that we know that that's actually scientifically impossible. We need carbon to actually exist on a planet. We are
Correct.
made of carbon.
Yes.
However, what she's saying is technically true because your first point was plants need carbon. They absolutely do. Mm-hmm. Plants grow in certain conditions, and if it warms, that is going to suit some plants better than others.
In some areas.
That's
right.
So there is like this glimmer of truth, and that's where I think this gets really frustrating because you can't just say, you straight up deny it because she's saying the truth, but the truth is it's not black and white like that.
No, it's not. We actually watched the news the other morning and we saw a climate protest in Sydney.
Yes.
Yeah. So she used a bike lock to attach herself to the steering wheel and she was on a major freeway.
Yeah, she was on
I believe.
Yeah,
so
correct.
she had just pulled over and done it. So she was copying abuse left, right and centre. Absolute outraged people screaming at her, right?
Yeah.
And then the next 2 news segments were about extreme weather. Hail, the
Yeah.
storm in Florida, which I actually don't even know how that ended up.
Yeah. I've seen memes, but I haven't seen like a lot of the real footage. But Florida, as a side note, is actually going to be one of the first cities in the continental base of the mainland US to actually go underwater, correct, because of their coastal line. A lot of parts of the state have actually been underwater, and we know they already have quite algal bloom issues. So their ecological system is getting far worse. But yes, continue.
Well, my point there is that people are outraged because they're inconvenienced by this protester, but they're not outraged at the floods. They're not putting that back onto themselves in any way, shape or form. And then there's this politician saying that climate change is good. It's so how do you even understand people's thought like that? So her other quote was, "The earth warming and carbon is actually healthy for us." I just want to also point out that she's a huge Trump supporter. Huge right winger.
I just assumed.
Yeah. And she had, when I did a Google search on her, the first thing I saw was that she's a conspiracy theorist. So it's just sad that there are people out there that will be listening to her and believing that.
Yeah.
And, their bias is now confirmed because this woman is a politician and she's supposed to be really intelligent, and yeah, it's just very sad to hear that.
Yeah, that's super frustrating, but It's so funny that politicians are meant to be intelligent. Yeah. Yeah.
But she's also mentioned how fossil fuels keep people alive. Yes, this is true, but there are other forms of keeping people alive without using fossil fuels. So you can assume by that her pockets are deep with fossil fuels.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, it's so funny talking about this climate change is good kind of thing. Last week, we released, or this week technically as recording, but the last episode released was with Dr. Andrew King, who is a meteorologist at University of Melbourne. So he works a lot with the river stratospheres, and he's an expert on the topic. He's written plenty of papers. He's featured in an ABC conversation, etc. Now, that episode has gotten the most amount of hate of any episode I've previously released.
Interesting.
By many, many folds. And it's also gotten, the shorts and the reels that I've posted on it have gotten thousands and thousands and thousands of views. Now, the comments coming are incredibly fascinating. They're very on the same point that climate change is natural, denying climate change, but trying to use very big words.
Scientific words,
but completely misconstruing what those words actually mean. Like, yes, no one who's talking about climate change is denying that the world goes in cycles.
No, ice ages have been happening for, many centuries.
And people are just saying, oh, this is natural and you can't prove anything. And it's funny how this happens. And they're all in the same boat. So if you look at them, they're all conspiracy theorists. They all believe, a certain thing that these conspiracy theorists believe. And I won't name.
So they've gone down a YouTube hole.
They've gone down the YouTube rabbit hole. And it's so fascinating how it's very consistent. What you find a climate denier or someone who thinks climate change is good, they have a certain set of values and beliefs that are so similar to everyone else in the community. And they tend to not question that, or they're very hard to communicate with. So,
because they've found their community, they can communicate this with their other people, and they're like, that means their mind is set. Their mind is made up.
Yeah. And look, vegans fall into that same category sometimes as well, with exacerbating science and things like that. But this is a lot more dangerous than making people exclude animal products. This is talking about, and some of the climate denialism comes from, who cares, if very cynical kind of views. So I find it very fascinating how, I don't know where it's come from, because last year, if you had asked me, I'd say there's not a lot of climate deniers, but now I'm thinking there's a lot more than I previously thought by many folds over.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's sad. A lot of them are politicians. And, I've heard plenty of them say, even in Australia, that climate change isn't a huge threat, especially if they're paid by fossil fuel industries. They have to, fund their ventures, and that means taking money from an industry that maybe doesn't have our best interests.
Greed.
That's right.